In many of the folk tales and fairy tales we've heard throughout this course, the heroes and the heroines either are, or aspire to be, handsome or beautiful. But what made the beautiful people in the story beautiful? What made the handsome prince handsome? Is it all about how they looked? Or is there more to being beautiful? Here's Dr. Gilles Guillaume to tell us more. So can you speak to the role of beauty and handsomeness?
In terms of beauty, the sort of desire for beauty and the fear of aging, those themes are very prominent in certain stages of fairy tales where the parental characters are becoming older, and that is a fear that becomes recognized in the face of a child's emerging beauty or competence. So these are themes of narcissism and the fear of narcissistic injury, that we are no longer competent or we will be displaced. The journey is of evolving into who you're going to become, and whether beauty will then substitute for wisdom. With that process, we have to deal with our own fears and narcissistic tendencies that I think the beauty and aging in fairy tales sort of signifies. Just like you would see in Snow White, that as she comes of age, the queen becomes extremely threatened because that is her definition of herself, and there's nothing else. But as we transcend how we define ourselves and grow, that can help us balance that fear of loss.
As you listen to today's story, listen for the ways that the queen uses different kinds of beauty to try to gain power. And you might be surprised by this Grimm's version of Snow White, because the queen not only wants to be beautiful, but she uses many instruments of beauty and of feminine beauty to get what she wants. She uses a corset and a comb, even something she artfully created, a beautiful apple. And listen for the very inventive ending for this witch of a woman. It may not be the ending that you think you know. Once upon a time, there was a queen. And this queen one day was sitting by the window. It was snowing outside, and it was awfully stuffy inside the room where she was. She was sewing by the window. And as she sewed, that room that was stuffy, she decided to crack open the window. And so she raised open the window. Everybody raise open the window. She cracked it open. There was an ebony, black, beautiful ebony frame around that window. She lifted it open just a crack, and those snowflakes were falling like feathers down at the edge of that ebony frame. And she sewed, and as she looked out that window, she pricked herself. And 3 little drops of blood, they fell right there onto that white, white snow. And as she looked, she said, if only I could have a child who was as black as ebony, and as red as blood, and as white as snow. And sure enough, just a little time later, she had a little baby girl. And that baby girl had hair as black as ebony, as black as that ebony frame around the window. And she had skin as white as snow, and lips as red as blood. But shortly after the girl was born, the queen died. And after a time, the king, he noticed another woman. And that woman, she was beautiful. And shortly after that, the king and this woman were married. And things went along fine for a while. And the new queen, every day, the queen would walk upstairs to the topmost tower. She would go and she would shut the door. She would take off her crown. Everybody take off your crown. She would take off her crown. She would stand in front of her mirror and she would say, "Mirror, mirror, on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" And the mirror every day would answer, "You, O queen, are the fairest one of all." Well, this went on for years and years, and as the years passed, the baby, she grew into a 7-year-old girl. And when the girl turned 7 years of age, the queen, as she did every day, climbed up those steps. She shut the door. She took off her crown. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? You, O queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White, the princess, she is 1,000 times fairer than you. And she was angry. She took her crown. Everybody take her crown. She slammed it back onto her head, opened up that door, and she went to find the huntsman. You must go out. You must take a dagger. You must take Snow White out into the woods, and you must kill her. You bring me back her lungs and her liver, and I will eat them with salt. Well, the huntsman, he did not like the... Do you like the idea of that? And no, he didn't either. But on he went. He was under the orders of the queen. He took the dagger, he took the girl, and he took her out into the woods, and just as he was about to kill her, oh no, I must, the queen told me that I must, oh no, I will run away into the woods. Go, run. And he brought back the lungs and the liver of another animal, and the queen ate those with salt. And the girl, she ran in the woods. She ran deeper and deeper until she came to a house. She opened the door, and she saw a beautifully laid table. It was very neat inside that house. There were 7 little plates and 7 little goblets of wine. Well, she was so hungry, she went and took a bite off of every one of those 7 little plates. She didn't want to take all the food off of one plate. That would be rude. And so she took one little sip out of each of the glasses of wine. She was tired. She went over. She saw there were 7 little beds, and she went and tried one. Oh, too hard. Oh, too soft, until she got over to the 7th, and by that time she was tired, and she fell fast asleep in the 7th bed. Well, sure enough, soon after that, home came the 7 little men who lived in that house, and they opened the door, and immediately they saw, and they started talking to themselves. Who's been eating my food? Who's been drinking my wine? Someone's in the house. They went walking over, and they went to their 7 little beds. Who's been sleeping on my pillow? Who's been ruffling up my sheets? Someone's in the beds. And they went walking over to each of the beds until finally, they saw the girl fast asleep. Now, you never wake a sleeping child, am I right? They let her sleep. So each of those dwarves climbed into their beds, and the poor 7th dwarf, who had no place to sleep, he slept an hour with each of the other dwarves in their beds. And the morning came, and the girl woke up. So did the rest of the little men. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was so hungry and so tired. You can stay if you keep things clean, just as clean as we keep them. You must knit for us and cook for us. Can you do that? Yeah. And she stayed. And she told them her story of how the queen was trying to come and to get her and to eat her. You may stay. But they all said it together. Beware of the queen. Don't open the door. Can you say that? Beware of the queen. Don't open the door. And every day they would leave and they would say just that. Beware of the queen. Don't open the door. And off they went, ba-bum, 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 down to the mines. And the girl, she stayed there and she cleaned in the house. But the queen, back in her castle, took off the crown. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? You, O queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White, who lives across the 7 mountains, is still 1,000 times more fair than you. Took the crown. Everybody take your crown. Slammed it on her head. Boom, 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 boom. She went down, and she got a corset. A corset was a piece of fabric with laces that women used to use to cinch in their waists and look very pretty, they thought. Well, she took a corset, and she put it in her basket. Everybody take your corset. And she got a cloak and flung it around her. Good job. Flung it around. She got some mud. Everybody get some mud. Put it all over her face and disguised herself as an old woman. And off she hobbled into the woods to go and find Snow White. And she found that house in the clearing. She went over. Snow White went over. She looked through the window. I have a lovely corset. Do you want it? You can buy it. Well, the girl, she liked the idea of having that beautiful corset of all the beautiful colors, and so she cracked the door open. Let me help you put it on. Well, the old woman pushed her way in and wrapped that corset around the girl, and she pulled those laces. Everybody pull the laces tighter and tighter and tighter. And the girl fell over, down on the ground. Back home, she hobbled. Well, after a while, who came home? Bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum. Who?
The 7
Mm-hmm. They walked. They saw the girl. Oh no! And they looked around. They saw that they didn't notice the corset before. Well, they went over. They got some scissors. Everybody get your shears. And they got. She could breathe. Her circulation had been cut off. She couldn't breathe. And she told them what had happened. What did they tell her? Beware of the queen. Don't open the door. The next day they went out. Bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, down to the mines. And the queen the next day, where did she go? Took the crown off. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who is the fairest one of all? You, O queen, are fair, it is true, but Snow White, who still lives with the 7 dwarfs, is still fairer than you. Took the crown. Everybody take your crown. Boom, 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 went down. And this time she took out her basket and she got a comb. And she dipped that comb, whoop, in poison. She put that comb into her basket, took the cloak, whoosh, took the mud. Everybody take the mud. Disguised herself again as a beggar woman. And in she went into the woods to go and find Snow White. Well, Snow White was a little more timid by this point, but she did peek through the window. Don't you want a lovely, beautiful comb for your hair? Well, Snow White, she cracked the door open. She reached her hand out and she grabbed the comb and she put it in her hair. And that poison hit her just as she hit the floor. Ha 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 ha! Home she went. And back home that evening, who came? Bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum. The 7 little men. They didn't see a corset, but they saw, they did not notice the comb. And they took out the comb. Everybody take out the comb. Took out the comb. She woke up. What did they tell her? Beware of the queen. Don't open the door. The next day they left. Bum, ba bum, ba bum, ba bum, down to the mines. The next day, the queen. Bum, 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 bum. What'd she do? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? Is still Snow White. Boom, 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 boom. This time she went and got 2 apples. She cut them in half. One was red, the other was white, and she took those halves of the apple. The red half, she dipped in poison. The white half, she stuck to the red. She put that in her basket, flung on her cloak, threw on the mud, and in she went into the woods to go and find Snow White. I am selling apples. Don't you want some? What did Snow White say this time?
No.
No. Nein. You are afraid it is poison. No, here, I will show you. And she took a bite of the white side of the apple, the part that had no poison. Here, you try some. And so she took that apple and took a bite of the red and juicy side. And she fell down on the floor. And the queen went back home. Up she went. Took off the crown. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? And the mirror replied, You, O queen, are fair, and you are the fairest one of all. And she picked up her crown. Because she knew she had defeated the girl. Back home that evening, who came? Bump-a-bump-a-bump-a-bump-a-bump. They saw no corset. They saw no comb. They didn't know what to do. Oh, no. Oh, it cannot be true. No, you cannot be dead. She was so beautiful. They laid her out on a table that they used to use a bier, that they used to use to lay a casket on. They laid her out, but after 3 days, she was still had the flush of life about her. They couldn't stand to put her in the cold, cold ground. And so they put a glass coffin around the little girl, the 7-year-old girl. And they kept her there. And as the years passed, she grew inside that coffin. And the years passed, and she grew, until finally, one day, a prince came riding through those woods. And he was lost, and he knocked on the door. Can I stay here for the night? Can you let me stay here for the night? And so he went inside, and he saw that girl in the casket, and... Can you sigh with me? You've done this before. And he fell in love. Well, the 7 little men, they took such pity on the prince for falling in love with this girl who was clearly not waking up. Well, they let him take her home with him. And so the prince, he had all of his servants carry the girl back home to his castle. Well, they took her back home, and when he was with her... when he was without her... he was miserable, and the servants who had to be around this prince who was and they got really tired of this pretty fast. And so one day when the prince was when he was away, miserable, away from his pretty girl who was in that glass coffin, well, the servants decided to have some fun. They opened up that glass lid. They sat her up. They started to kind of play with her. They beat her on the back. Whoppa, whoppa, whoppa. And at the third whoppa, she coughed out that piece of red apple. Where am I? And in walked the prince. Ooh. And then he saw her. And they were married. And when the invitations for the wedding came out, who do you think got an invitation to that wedding?
The queen. The queen.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all? You, O queen, are fair, it is true, but the girl who is about to marry the prince right next door is 1,000 times more fair than you. Bah! Grabbed her crown. Boom, 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 boom. And she got in her carriage and she rode out. She had to see if it killed her. She had to see who this person was. And in she walked, and there she saw Snow White. And Snow White saw her. And the prince saw her. And do you know what they decided to do with her? They took iron shoes, and they stuck those iron shoes into the fire, got them red hot. And they took those red hot shoes out, and they put an iron shoe, red hot, onto the queen. They put the other red hot shoe onto the queen, and they made her dance. They clapped, and they made her dance. And she danced, and she danced, and she danced until she died. And that was the end of the queen. She danced herself to death. And Snow White and her prince lived happily together to the end of their days. The world is full of all kinds of beauty and all kinds of ugliness. In different time periods in different parts of the world, groups of people have decided different things about what makes a person handsome or beautiful. In 18th century France, men and women cinched in their waists and wore high-heeled shoes and high, curly wigs with white powder on them, because such things signified handsomeness and beauty and wealth. The obsession with wrinkles stretches at least back to ancient Egypt. That infamous bust of Nefertiti has an internal cast that was made of the queen's actual face. And in fact, she had deep wrinkles in the sides of her mouth and her cheeks, and there was a bump on her nose, all of which the royal sculptor Thutmose smoothed away in his sculpture. To the ancient Greeks, beauty was all about symmetry, the eyes in equal proportion, the arms and the legs in equal proportion, and how those symmetrical parts of the body look in motion. So beauty came down to a game of numbers, how mathematically symmetrical your face was. In the Baroque period, beauty was associated with having a nimble mind and intellect, which appears in folk stories as wit, such as what the Beast lacked in the French version of Beauty and the Beast. In the Middle Ages, we begin to see a real focus on an old and incorrect concept, a connection being made in art to the outer form of a person or a thing, connoting their inner goodness or wickedness, one being in proportion to the other. In the story, Snow White is tempted to trust the stepmother in all of her disguises because she looks nice or harmless. Have you ever encountered someone who looked very pretty or very handsome on the outside, but spoke or acted unkindly? Have you ever met someone kind and funny, someone who has inner beauty, but isn't the most handsome or beautiful person on the outside? Let's talk a bit now about how women and men need and use beauty and handsomeness in stories. Often in traditional fairy tales, while it's handy for the prince to be handsome, it's often essential for the girl to be beautiful. Now, why is this? To answer this question, we have to make an important distinction. Beauty isn't the same thing as power in these stories. Rather, beauty is a woman's tool to access power. Because throughout most of human history, women haven't merely lacked power, but access to positions of power within political structures of the time. The stepmother can't be king. Her only access to royalty is through marriage to the king, and her access to the king is through the tool of her beauty. Now, just as the king would wield his sword on the battlefield as a way of gaining power over other countries, well, the stepmother, she wields her beauty like a weapon to subjugate the king's attention. She catches his eye, and in doing so, she's caught him and his power. Beauty is a tool, a weapon. And when she loses her status as most beautiful, it's as if she has been disarmed on the battlefield. She's lost her sword, her weapon, her tool for maintaining power and agency. Except when a king loses his sword and laments it, we call that tragedy. When a woman loses her beauty and laments it, well, we call that vanity. The handsome prince is also a consistent image in fairy tales, but his power doesn't lie in his appearance, rather in his position of power. He is a prince. It's handy to be handsome because it makes the princess or the commoner finally fall in love with you, as in The Frog King or East of the Sun, West of the Moon. The girl doesn't fall for the guy in these stories until he reveals himself to be handsome, and that's a huge thing, getting somebody else to like you. But Snow White points out something very important about the distinction between beauty for women and handsomeness for men. Handsomeness for the prince doesn't gain him access to political power. When we see the handsome prince, he attracts women to him, and it's usually with the effect of raising the woman's social and political status. He needs a woman to provide him with heirs, yes, but if he wants a woman, he can just marry her, like the king does with the miller's daughter. Now, interestingly, this version of Snow White, as with the French version of Sleeping Beauty, it doesn't have the prince kissing the princess awake. She awakens by accident. A servant plays with her like a puppet, and out pops the poison. Or she awakens at the right time, as with Sleeping Beauty. It's only later, as mostly male writers or male publishers continually refined and rewrote the older traditional versions, well, it's only then that the prince becomes the key to the girl's awakening. And these sleeping girls' access to the prince, the key to their resurrection, it's once again through their beauty. Each of them, while sleeping, attracts a prince. Handsomeness, it's a perk to princehood, but his power resides in the title to which he was born. Beauty for these women is an indispensable tool. And in later versions of these stories that we may be more familiar with through popular movies, well, the women, they may be royal, but they're put to sleep, and they can't wake themselves up. Beauty is their access to the prince, who holds the power to awaken. Which is what's so amazing about the oral traditional versions of these stories. The closer we get to the oral traditional versions of the classics, the more we see the folk using tales as a way for unlikely characters, particularly women, to assert authority on their own strength of will, like the feisty Molly Whoopie in Scotland, or their own physical endurance, as with the girl in East of the Sun, West of the Moon. She rides on the backs of the winds to get her prince. And it's crucial to note that the queen isn't raging against the machine. She's not battling men for power. She's battling other women, youthful women. Metaphorically, which is what these stories really are, they're metaphors for life, the story plays out what often happens in our own society. Instead of helping each other, the women tear each other apart over their appearances. Now, we do this more politely, of course, nowadays. Rather than sending a huntsman out with a dagger, we kill each other with our words. Did you see what she was wearing? We police each other, hold one another accountable for playing out our role as attractive, or not, to other people. Beauty tips are called beauty secrets, not just as secrets from men, but as something other women haven't told you yet. But we all, men and women, well, we're beginning to get a little more savvy about this. As one very powerful woman, Madeleine Albright, once said recently, there's a warm place in Hades reserved for women who don't help other women. And there's a very important character who keeps pointing the queen to other women. But we often don't think of him as a character because he's an inanimate object. Do you know who he is? The queen doesn't start being unkind until the mirror tells her there's someone fairer than her. And it's strange that she has a mirror that speaks to her, isn't it? What is the mirror character all about? Now, folklorists often suggest that the mirror is the voice of culture, speaking back to the queen. Typically, we've been taught by those around us what is beautiful. And you've probably been told by someone who loves you that you're beautiful or you're handsome. Someone combed your hair when you were younger until you learned to comb it yourself. Someone dressed you until you knew how to choose clothes for yourself. Someone taught you how to be kind. And the people around us influence how we dress, how we do our hair, even how we think about ourselves. And these people act like mirrors. They make us look at ourselves through their own eyes and through their own ways of evaluating our looks. Now, sometimes when we look in the mirror, we see ourselves and we evaluate ourselves. And what we see is influenced by the people around us and what they tell us. The voice we hear in our heads when we evaluate ourselves in the mirror, what the mirror tells us, is really the voice of the culture around us. Who are the mirrors in your life who tell you whether you're beautiful or not? Who do you turn to evaluate your beauty or your handsomeness, inside and out? However, in the end, what the queen wants is peace, and the mirror can't give her that. In the end, it's not her vanity that kills her. It's her trust in the mirror instead of her own sense of self-worth. She says, I will die if I don't find out who this more beautiful woman is in the end when she gets to the point about going to the wedding. And ultimately, when we consistently turn to the people around us to tell us who we are, we don't get to decide for ourselves who we are and how we see ourselves. At some point, we need to be our own mirrors. Next, we're going to hear a different story, but with similar characters. There's a girl and a mother and an evil sorceress and a prince and a father and a king. And we'll talk more about how age impacts our ideas about what is beautiful and about these triads of women figures in stories: mother, maiden, crone, and some male counterparts: warrior, father, sage.